Okay, and welcome to day 3. I still have no idea how I'm going to segment these videos, whether there will be literally 7 videos for the 7 days, or I will try and bunch a few together to save you having to go through everything. But I am here at Bobolice, so this is my technically 3rd hotel, but 2nd hotel en route. And yesterday was a grueling day. I did about 55,000 steps, and yeah, not all of it is on level ground. You do have a bit of up and down, and with the rain yesterday there were parts that were maybe a little bit treacherous. Luckily I came prepared. I have things like a trekking pole and things like that in here in my backpack, so that's good. I ran out of water at the end of the day, but luckily, as I was nearing the end of the day, I've had to buy some from the hotel this morning. But yeah, I'm going to have a lot to say about this trip, but it's been cool. Tiring, but cool. Right, now on to Ogrodzieniec, my next stop. Dzień dobry and welcome to A Brit in Poland. With this channel, I travel across the country, I bring you the culture, and I show you just how amazing Poland is. So I invite you on my journey. If you want to see more, I have Facebook and Instagram profiles, which you will find links to in the description below. And if you want to really help out, you can turn to my Patreon or Patronite accounts, again in the description. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this video. Please like, share and subscribe. Do zobaczenia. After the longest day of the trail, I woke up with Bobolice Castle right there, which sounds ideal, but with around 25 kilometres ahead of me, I could not wait for it to open. So Bobolice would have to remain unfinished for now. The more immediate concern was water. I had managed to buy 3 small glass bottles from the castle shop, which was better than nothing, but on a 25-kilometre hiking day, 3 small glass bottles feel less like a plan and more like a polite suggestion. So I left Bobolice with enough water to begin the day, but not enough to trust the day. I was not in trouble, but I did need the trail to provide something later, preferably before I became a tragic British raisin somewhere in the Polish Jura. The first stretch out of Bobolice was more than I expected. After the drama of the castle in the limestone rocks, the trail moved past several houses and out into fields, with the landscape spreading wide again. The weather had changed too. The first 2 days had been grey, cool and rainy. This was different. Still cloudy, but brighter, with patches of sun starting to break through. Not hot yet. Not threatening rain either. More like the trail was slowly turning up the light. And physically, that made a difference. I was still carrying the effort of yesterday, but this did not feel like a punishment straight away. Not yet. That part would come later. Sneaky little day. For now, the walking was steady. Open ground, small roads, a short forest section, and then back towards the villages and tracks that link the castles together. This is where episode 3 begins differently than episode 2. Yesterday had been about survival, almost from the start. Rain, distance, close castles, and long grinds towards Bobolice. This morning had a different feeling. The problem was there, the water, the distance, the unfinished castles behind me, but the trail still felt open. There was still curiosity in it. I was not yet counting down to the finish, I was still looking around. The first named place on the route was Zborow, a small village, quiet, easy to pass through, the kind of place that barely announces itself, but still matters when you are walking. On a map, it is just a point between larger names. On foot, it becomes proof that you are moving, a sign. A road, a few houses, a little reassurance that the line on the map is becoming real under your feet.
And then the trail pulled me onwards again, towards forest, strange little landmarks, and the first signs that the limestone landscape was about to get more dramatic. Because the real centrepiece of this day was still ahead. I did not know it yet, but the trail was about to change completely. The rocks that had been background scenery so far were going to take over. And before long, the Eagle's Nest Trail would stop feeling like a route between castles and start feeling like a maze built by the landscape itself. After Zborow, the trail settled back into a quiet rhythm. Fields, trees, small roads, patches of forest. Nothing too dramatic yet, but the day was beginning to stretch itself out. On paper, 25 kilometres is just a number. On foot, it becomes time, it becomes water calculations, it becomes every small decision about pace, rest, and whether you should have brought one more suspicious pastry when you had the chance. Somewhere along the day, the route passed Red Mill, or Cheverny Mwyn, tucked away in the forest like a strange little interruption. After the empty stretches of trail, suddenly there was this hotel and spa-like complex sitting among the trees. Not quite a village, not quite wilderness, just one of those odd Polish trail moments where you're walking through forest, thinking only about distance and water. And then civilization appears wearing a bathrobe. Then came a small railway bridge. Nothing grand, just a low crossing under the tracks. But it had one detail I remember, graffiti saying smoke. Sometimes the trail gives you medieval castles, romantic poets, and limestone geology. Sometimes it gives you a railway bridge that says smoke. Balance is important. After the bridge, the landscape started to change. At first, it was subtle. More rocks beside the path, bigger limestone shapes appearing between the trees. The kind of formations that earlier in the trail might have been background detail, but here they started to feel like a warning, or maybe a promise. The forest became more interesting with every turn. The rocks were no longer just scattered around the landscape, they were starting to organize it. Boulders beside the trail, stone walls through the trees, limestone shapes rising from the ground like something half-built and half-eroded. This was where the episode began to separate itself from the previous day. Episode 2 had been about distance, rain, closed castles, and human kindness. This was different. Here the trail was becoming visual. Climb towards Góra Zborów was not brutally steep, but it did enough to slow the pace and build anticipation. The rocks were getting larger, the gaps between them were getting narrower. The trail was no longer simply passing through the landscape, it was being pulled into it. And then after that gradual build-up, fields, forest, Red Mill and the railway bridge, the landscape opened into one of the most extraordinary places I had seen anywhere in Poland. And honestly, I was not ready for it. Góra Zborów was the moment this day changed completely. Until now, the rocks had been building in the background, appearing beside the path, rising through the forest, hinting that something larger was coming. And then suddenly, they were everywhere. Limestone towers, narrow gaps, boulders stacked into strange shapes. A whole hilltop landscape that felt less like a viewpoint and more like a natural fortress, or maybe a maze. The castles may be the reason people talk about this trail, but here the landscape itself became the main attraction. Góra Zborów rises to around 467 meters, but the height is not really the point. The drama comes from the limestone. This is the same Jurassic rock that shapes the whole Eagle's Nest Trail, and here it feels concentrated, exaggerated, almost theatrical. Over millions of years, water dissolved softer parts of the rock and left these harder towers and blocks behind. Or, less scientifically, nature spent a very long time making a fantasy film set. This was also the first place on the trail that felt genuinely busy. After days of quiet paths, empty forests, and villages where I sometimes seemed to be the only person voluntarily walking through them, Góra Zborów had people, especially climbers, and seeing people on the limestone faces changed everything. From a distance, the rocks looked impressive. With climbers on them, they suddenly became enormous. It made the place feel less lonely too. Not crowded, just alive. I spent a while here, longer than I probably should have, considering the distance still ahead, but this was not a place to rush. I even took the backpack off for a bit, which by day 3 felt like briefly removing a small, needy animal from my spine. Without it, I could actually explore, move between the rocks, look properly, and for a while the day stopped being about water distance or getting to Ogrodzieniec. It was just this. Limestone, wind, views, and the feeling that I had stumbled into one of the most spectacular landscapes in Poland. At one point, I climbed into one of the rocks to get a better view. A bold and heroic decision. It lasted approximately until the wind reminded me that I am not, in fact, a mountain goat. The view was beautiful. My balance was less beautiful, so I made another bold and heroic decision. I went back down. Sometimes courage means knowing when gravity is getting ideas. And of course, a place this strange has legends. The name Zborow is linked with the idea of a gathering, and local folklore says witches once met here before flying to the Great Sabbath at Gora, which honestly feels believable. If you were a witch looking for somewhere dramatic to hold a meeting, this would be a strong candidate. Good rocks, good atmosphere, plenty of places to hide a cauldron. And once you start walking between the formations, you understand why stories like that appear. The place already feels half real. Folklore just finishes the job. But eventually the backpack had to go back on. A tragic moment, possibly the saddest reunion of the day, because Góra Zborów may have been the reward, but it was not the finish. Ogrodzieniec was still far ahead. The water problem was not fully solved, and the day was quietly preparing to become much harder. Leaving Góra Zborów was difficult, not because the path was hard, but because places like that make you want to stay. But the map had not become any shorter, so the backpack went on. The water situation remained suspicious, and I started moving south again. The landscape did not become ordinary straight away. Even after Góra Zborów, the limestone kept appearing along the route. Smaller formations, sudden rocks beside the path, the same Jura character following me through the forest. Somewhere along this section, I passed Apteka, another limestone formation and climbing area. And after Góra Zborów, it felt more like an echo than the centrepiece. The Jura had lowered the volume, but it had not gone quiet. Eventually, the trail brought me to Bąkowiec Castle, also known as the castle at Morsko. And this is one of the stranger stops on the route, because the ruins sit right beside a hotel and recreation complex. Medieval walls, limestone rocks, forest, and then suddenly holiday resort energy. Very Poland. Very would you like history with your spa weekend. The castle itself is modest, but it looks good. It dates back to the 14th or 15th century, with a first written mention in 1390. Today, what remains is mostly fragments, walls, a gate, a small courtyard, all sitting on the limestone rock above the forest. You cannot really explore it like a full castle visit, but it had atmosphere. And after Góra Zborów, it felt like part of the same story. The rock came first and people built around it. But the real victory here was not historical, it was water. At the hotel complex, I was finally able to buy more. After leaving Bobolice with 3 small glass bottles and a prayer, this felt less like shopping and more like a diplomatic breakthrough. I also bought my usual fridge magnet, because apparently even dehydration cannot defeat the souvenir goblin. So Bąkowiec became the place where the day stabilized. The water problem was solved. The first half of the route had given me more than expected. But Ogrodzieniec was still a long way south, and after this, the day would slowly stop being about discovery and start becoming about getting there. After Bąkowiec, the trail settled into a long southern ribbon. Forest, fields, rocks, village roads. The water problem was solved, which helped, but the day itself was still much bigger than I expected. And that is something I was starting to learn about this trail. Distance is only part of the equation. 25 kilometres with open shops, easy paths and short stops is one thing. 25 kilometres with castles, rock formations, villages, sand and tired legs is something else entirely. Same number, different beast. Piaseczno passed quickly. Then the route continued through more open countryside, with large boulders still appearing in the landscape like echoes of the morning's limestone drama. But after a while, the day began to change. Not suddenly, just slowly enough that I noticed I was no longer really exploring in the same way. Somewhere around Górze, the fatigue arc properly began. Until then, even with the water concern and the distance ahead, I had still been curious. Góra Zborów had been spectacular, Bąkowiec had been a useful surprise. The trail had still been giving me things. I was less interested in what came next. I was much more interested in finishing. The villages started to blur into each other. Górze, Solini, Karlin, names on the map becoming small negotiations with tired legs. There was still scenery, still fields, and still the occasional rock or view that on another day I might have given more attention. But by this point, the day had narrowed. The goal was simple: keep moving. And then the trail gave me sand, which is a ridiculous surface to walk on near the end of a long hiking day. Rocks are honest, hills at least have the decency to look like a problem. Sand is sneakier. It looks harmless, then quietly steals energy from every step. Earlier in the day, the limestone had made the trail magical. Now the ground was collecting payment. I tried to see Fort Zborow, but by the time I reached it, that was closed too. All I could really see was the wooden palisade up on the hill. Normally, that would have been frustrating, but by this stage, I was too tired to negotiate emotionally with another closed attraction. The trail had already won that argument. And then came the big one, Ogrodzieniec. The castle was there, the most dramatic castle on the whole trail, sitting above Podzamcze, exactly where it was supposed to be. And I did not go up. Not because I did not want to, but because after 25 kilometers, Góra Zborów, Bąkowiec, the long village march, the sand, and one last closed hilltop, my body made a very clear decision. No. And honestly, it was right. The castle would still be there in the morning. I would not improve the visit by dragging myself up there half dead just to prove a point. This was not failure, this was trail management. Slightly undignified trail management, yes, but trail management. So I carried on to Ogrodzieniec town itself. The hotel was harder to find than I wanted it to be, because of course it was. I had to call and wait for someone to come out, which is exactly the kind of small inconvenience that feels enormous when your legs have already submitted their resignation. But eventually I got in. The bag came off, the day was done. Mostly. Because there was still the ancient hiking ritual of finding food after everything sensible had closed. The restaurants were closed, the kebab place was not. And at that moment, that made it one of the most important cultural institutions in southern Poland. There was also a żabka, which meant I could stock up for the next day. Food, water, supplies, basic things, beautiful things. The glamorous ending to the day of limestone towers, witches, castles, sand, and strategic collapse. But the decision not to visit Ogrodzieniec that evening did not just end day 3, it changed day 4. Visiting the castle in the morning meant starting late, and starting late meant the original walking plans no longer made sense. So the trail had forced the trade. Push too hard now and risk ruining the castle, or rest, come back properly, and adjust the route tomorrow. I chose the second option. And after the day I had just walked, I still think it was the right one. Ogrodzieniec was unfinished, but this time it was unfinished on purpose. And thank you for joining me on day 3 of the trail. Day 4 will come next, and it will come with one of the best castles on the trail. In fact, a couple of castles. And it will end near one of Poland's most dramatic landscapes. So please come back, and thank you very much for watching. Give the video a like, give me a subscribe, and do zobaczenia. Pa pa.